Lucas Brandt stared at the digital display projected onto the transparent wall of his new quarters. The soft blue glow illuminated his weary face as he read the welcome message for the 5th time. Welcome to Peaceward Station, Sector Theta. Interspecies Integration Program, Cycle 87. Human participant, Brandt. Lucas, Earth, Sol System. Assignment, Quarters, T9, Dormitory Wing. Roommate, Vel Karish, Zakari, Matic System. Mission, Cohabitation, Cultural Exchange, Conflict Resolution. He sighed, dropping his small duffel bag onto the sparse metal floor. The room was divided perfectly into 2 halves, sterile, efficient, and utterly devoid of personality, just like the rest of the Galactic Coalition's facilities. 600 years of interstellar cooperation, and they still can't design a comfortable chair, Lucas muttered, testing the rigid surface of what passed for furniture in the common area. The year 3218 marked humanity's 6th century of participation in the Coalition, a vast network of 72 sentient species, united under principles of logic, order, and emotional restraint. Earth was merely a footnote in the Grand Alliance, having joined after nearly destroying itself in the resource wars of the 26th century. Lucas wasn't supposed to be here. Former special tactical operatives with his psychological profile weren't typically selected for peace programs. But after the Zenthar conflict and the trauma that followed, someone in the bureaucratic machine had decided he needed reintegration. A harsh, mechanical sound interrupted his thoughts as the door to the quarters slid open. Lucas tensed instinctively, his right hand twitching toward a weapon that wasn't there. His new roommate entered. Karish Vel stood nearly 7 feet tall, her scaled body covered in iridescent plates that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. 2 primary arms ended in 4-fingered hands with retractable claws, while a smaller secondary pair folded against her torso. Her face was distinctly reptilian, with vertical pupils set in amber eyes and a jaw that could, according to the briefing materials, unhinge to consume prey twice the size of a human head. Zakari, the most feared predatory species in the Coalition, evolved from apex hunters on a world with 3 suns and virtually no night. They didn't sleep, they didn't forgive, and they certainly didn't forget. "Hey there, roomie," Lucas said with an easy smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I was just getting settled in. I'm Lucas." Karish's eyes narrowed, vertical pupils contracting to thin slits. "I am aware of your designation, human. Your presence has been noted in my files for 17 Coalition standard days." Her voice was surprisingly melodic, though the translation module clipped the edges of her words. "Right. Efficient." Lucas nodded, maintaining his casual demeanor while mentally noting all potential exits and impromptu weapons in the room. Old habits. "Well, I took the left side, if that's okay. The assignment didn't specify, but I figured." "The division of space is irrelevant," Karish interrupted, placing a metallic case on her side of the room. "I require minimal rest areas. Your species' need for excessive unconsciousness is inefficient, but has been accounted for." "Gee, thanks." Lucas leaned back against the wall, studying her movements. There was a fluid precision to them, a predatory economy he recognized from his own training. "So, you're military too?" Karish stiffened, almost imperceptibly. "I serve in the Zakari Elite Guard. I am here by command of the High Matriarch to observe the integration practices of lesser species." "Lesser, huh?" Lucas's smile widened, though his eyes remained vigilant. "Always nice to start with realistic expectations." Karish turned to face him fully, her secondary arms unfolding slightly, a sign of aggression he'd been briefed about. "Do not mistake protocol for camaraderie. Human. Our cohabitation is a requirement, not a choice. I will fulfill my duties to the Coalition, but I have no interest in your primitive social rituals." "Primitive, lesser, Any other compliments you'd like to get out of the way on day one? Lucas kept his tone light, but he was mapping her stance, calculating reach distances, assessing weak points in her armor plating. You misunderstand, Karish said, her head tilting slightly. These are not insults. They are classifications. Humans are categorized as a level 3 species. Zakari are level 1. This is factual. Lucas pushed himself off the wall, rolling his shoulders casually. You know what? I think we're going to get along just fine. Nothing builds friendship like clear hierarchies. Karish made a sound that the translator didn't process, possibly the Zakari equivalent of a scoff. The concept of friendship is irrelevant to our assignment. We will coexist, train together, and complete the required exercises. Nothing more is needed. Whatever you say, Rumi. Lucas turned to unpack his meager belongings, carefully arranging them in the standard-issue storage compartments. Behind him, he could feel Karish's predatory gaze tracking his movements. In his mind, Lucas was already counting the days until this assignment would end. 365 standard cycles. A full Earth year of living with an apex predator who clearly despised humans. What could possibly go wrong? Lucas woke with a start, his body instantly alert despite the grogginess in his mind. The nightmares had been particularly vivid. Memories of the Zenther moonbase, the faces of his squad, the screams that shouldn't have carried through the vacuum of space, but somehow did in his dreams. He sat up, running a hand through his short dark hair, and glanced toward the other side of the room. Karish was sitting cross-legged on her sleeping platform, eyes closed, but Lucas knew better than to think she was unaware. Zakari never truly slept. They entered meditation states that allowed their consciousness to rest while maintaining sensory awareness. 6 days had passed in tense coexistence. They had attended separate orientation sessions, taken different meal shifts, and exchanged fewer than 20 sentences total. Lucas had been careful to respect the invisible boundaries Karish had established, maintaining distance and minimizing interaction. The room's environmental controls had malfunctioned overnight, leaving the air unusually dry and warm for his human preferences. Lucas felt a tickle in his nasal passages as the recycled air irritated his sinuses. He tried to suppress it. He really did. Achoo! The sneeze echoed in the sparse room like a gunshot. Karish's eyes snapped open, pupils constricting to pinpricks. She was on her feet in a fluid motion that seemed to defy physics, her primary arms extended and secondary arms unfolding into combat position. "What have you done?" she hissed, the translator struggling to convey the mix of shock and rage in her voice. Lucas blinked, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. Sneezed? Sorry about that. Dry air. You expelled bodily fluids in our shared atmospheric space." Karish's voice had dropped to a dangerous register, her scales darkening to a deep midnight blue, a warning coloration he'd been briefed about. "This is a Class 1 territorial violation." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "It's just a sneeze. Involuntary human response to irritants. Not exactly biological warfare." In Zakari culture, the deliberate release of bodily substances in a communal dwelling is the highest form of disrespect. Karish took a step forward, her claws now fully extended. It is equivalent to a declaration of dominance challenge. Lucas could see this was escalating beyond reason. "Bro, chill. It was just a sneeze." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Bro?" Karish repeated, the translator struggling with the colloquialism. "You address me with a term of familial relationship?" "It's just slang," Lucas explained, feeling sweat beading on his forehead from the malfunctioning environmental controls. "Not meant literally. Look, it's getting really hot in here." Without thinking, he grabbed the hem of his sleep shirt and pulled it over his head, tossing it aside. Karish froze, her amber eyes widening. The room's lighting reflected off the constellation of scars across Lucas's torso, remnants of battles on a dozen worlds. But it was the distinctive mark over his heart that captured the Zakari warrior's attention, an unusual pattern of raised tissue forming what looked like an ancient symbol. "The mark of the flame-bearer," Karish whispered, her voice suddenly devoid of its translation overlay. Lucas frowned. "The what now?" Karish stepped back, her combat stance shifting subtly to a more defensive posture. "You bear the symbol of Virkath, the ancient destroyer, the one who burns worlds. This," Lucas glanced down at the scar tissue, "got this during a covert op on Proxima B. Building collapsed on me, caught fire. Nothing mystical about it." The Zakari warrior's eyes narrowed in suspicion. "The timing of your bodily expulsion, the familial address, the revealing of the mark, these cannot be coincidences." Lucas sighed, grabbing a fresh shirt from his storage unit. "Look, I don't know what kind of cosmic significance you're assigning to my morning allergies, but I assure you, it's just human biology being inconvenient. The ancient texts speak of one who would come bearing the mark of fire," Karish continued, her voice lower now. "One who would speak the old words and reveal the symbol of destruction, the harbinger of the great change." "Right." Lucas pulled on the clean shirt. "And let me guess, this harbinger is bad news for everyone?" Karish's head tilted, studying him with new intensity. "The texts are unclear. Some interpretations suggest destruction, others, transformation." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, exhausted by the cultural minefield he'd stumbled into before even having his morning coffee. "Well, I hate to disappoint your ancient prophecies, but I'm just a human with seasonal allergies and some old battle scars. Nothing apocalyptic about me." The Zakari warrior remained silent, her posture still rigid, but no longer overtly hostile. Finally, she spoke. "We will proceed with our scheduled integration activities. But know this, human, I will be watching you closely." "Wouldn't expect anything less," Lucas muttered, heading toward the sanitation unit. "Just another day in interspecies diplomacy." As the door closed behind him, he leaned against the wall, heart racing faster than the minor confrontation warranted. Karish's reaction to his scar had been genuine surprise, and something else. Fear? Recognition? He traced the outline of the mark on his chest through his shirt. The medical officers had always told him it was just random scar tissue from thermal burns and shrapnel, but he'd always felt an odd connection to it, as though it were more than just damaged flesh. Whatever Karish thought she saw, it had saved him from a potential diplomatic incident, or worse. For now, at least, his alien roommate was more interested in observing him than attacking him. Small victories, Lucas thought. In the Coalition's grand game of interspecies chess, sometimes staying alive for another day was the best you could hope for. The training arena on Level 7 of Peaceward Station hummed with activity, as participants from 24 species engaged in various combat simulations. The Coalition insisted on calling them conflict resolution exercises. But Lucas recognized military drills when he saw them. 3 weeks had passed since the sneeze incident. Karish had maintained a cold distance, watching him with unnerving intensity, but making no further references to ancient prophecies or fiery harbingers. Their required integration activities had proceeded with mechanical efficiency, both of them performing exactly as needed. No more, no less. Lucas adjusted the settings on the training gauntlets, deliberately calibrating them below his actual capabilities. Years of special operations had taught him the value of being underestimated. "Your preparation time exceeds standard parameters," Karish noted as she approached the training circle. Her combat gear was minimal. Zakari natural armor made additional protection largely unnecessary. "Just making sure everything's working properly," Lucas replied with an easy smile. "These older models can be finicky." Karish's amber eyes narrowed. "The equipment is less than 1 standard cycle old. Your statement is factually incorrect. Figure of speech. Lucas shrugged, stepping into the circle. Ready when you are. Their assignment for the day was simple. A basic sparring session to assess compatible fighting styles and develop cooperative tactics. Most species pairs treated it as a choreographed dance, carefully avoiding actual contact while demonstrating theoretical moves. Lucas knew within seconds that Karish had no intention of following that unspoken rule. Her first strike came with blinding speed. Claws retracted, but the force behind her blow enough to crack ribs if it connected. Lucas sidestepped, his movement so minimal that it appeared almost lazy, yet precisely calculated to avoid the attack by mere millimeters. Interesting approach to cooperative tactics, he commented, maintaining his relaxed posture. Combat simulation without intent lacks educational value, Karish replied, circling him with predatory focus. Your species learns through pressure, through pain. Her secondary attack came from below, a sweeping motion aimed at destabilizing his balance. Lucas shifted his weight, absorbing the impact and redirecting it. You've studied human combat techniques, he observed, still not launching any attacks of his own. I have studied all Level 3 species' defensive capabilities. Karish increased her tempo, launching a complex series of strikes that would have overwhelmed most opponents. Your patterns are predictable, efficiency compromised by emotional considerations. Lucas continued evading, his movements appearing almost casual despite their precision. Around them, other pairs had stopped their own exercises to watch the increasingly intense exchange. You know what they say about humans? Lucas asked conversationally, ducking under a strike that would have connected with his throat. We're predictably unpredictable. For 15 minutes, the pattern continued, Karish attacking with increasingly complex combinations, Lucas evading with minimal movement, never counterattacking. The Zakari warrior's frustration became evident in her accelerating pace and the darkening color of her scales. Your refusal to engage is cowardice, she finally stated, her breathing controlled, but slightly elevated. Lucas smiled. Or strategy? Explain. You've expended approximately 73% of your optimal energy reserves. Your right primary arm is compensating for mild strain in the secondary muscle group. Your attack patterns have become predictable due to fatigue-induced limitation. Lucas's voice remained casual. Meanwhile, I've conserved energy, studied your tendencies, and identified 17 exploitable weaknesses in your technique. Karish's eyes widened slightly. You have been analyzing rather than fighting. Fighting smart rather than hard, Lucas corrected. Something they don't teach in the Zakari Elite Guard, apparently. The insult was calculated, and Karish responded exactly as he anticipated, with a direct, committed attack that left her momentarily overextended. Lucas moved. One moment he was seemingly vulnerable. The next, Karish found herself immobilized in a complex hold that utilized her own momentum against her. Lucas had positioned himself at her blind spot, using minimal force applied to precise pressure points. This is what humans call a checkmate, he said quietly, close to where her auditory receptors were located. In a real fight, you'd be unconscious or dead now. He released her immediately, stepping back and resuming his relaxed stance. The training arena had gone silent. No human had ever bested a Zakari warrior in direct combat during a coalition exercise, at least not officially. Karish straightened, her expression unreadable to most observers. But Lucas caught the subtle shift in her posture, not anger or humiliation, but reassessment. Your combat approach is unconventional, she stated. I'll take that as a compliment. It was an observation. Karish's head tilted slightly. You were military elite, yet you display none of the standard human military signatures in your technique. Lucas shrugged. Maybe I'm just special. No. Karish's amber eyes fixed on him with disturbing intensity. You are something else entirely. Something not in the Coalition databases. Before Lucas could respond, the training session was interrupted by the facility-wide announcement system. Attention, all participants. Special assessment exercise will commence in 1 hour. Report to assignment stations for briefing. Lucas glanced at the time display. That's not on the schedule. No, Karish agreed, her attention diverted from their previous conversation. It is not. As they left the training arena, Lucas noticed several Coalition security observers tracking their movements with enhanced optical implants. The casual assessment had become something else. He recognized the signs of heightened surveillance from his operational days. Someone was taking a special interest in him, again. And in his experience, that was never good news. The special assessment turned out to be a simulated crisis response in the station's ancient artifacts wing, a museum-like section housing technological relics from pre-Coalition civilizations. Teams of 2 would navigate a scenario involving hostile forces attempting to steal classified artifacts. Lucas and Karish had been assigned to defend the central chamber, a circular room containing items deemed too dangerous or valuable for public knowledge. The exercise was ostensibly about protecting historical treasures, but Lucas recognized a security test when he saw one. This scenario is artificially constrained, Karish observed as they reviewed the tactical layout. The defensive positions provided offer suboptimal coverage of the primary access points. That's because they want us to fail, Lucas replied, studying the holographic display. Or at least, they want to see how we handle failure. Karish's scales shifted to a thoughtful indigo. Explain your reasoning. Look at the team assignments. Lucas highlighted the distribution of pairs throughout the simulation area. We're the only mixed capability team assigned to a critical sector. Everyone else has balanced defensive capabilities. You believe we were selected specifically for this position. I believe nothing in the Coalition happens by random chance. Lucas zoomed in on their assigned chamber. Especially not when it involves experimental weapon storage disguised as a museum exhibit. Karish's eyes narrowed. The artifacts wing contains historical items, not weapons. Lucas gave her a sidelong glance. If that's what you need to believe. The simulation began without further warning. Holographic adversaries, modeled after various Coalition species but wearing unmarked combat gear, began infiltrating the artifact's wing from multiple entry points. Lucas and Karish took their positions in the central chamber, a circular room with 8 equally spaced pillars surrounding a central pedestal. The pedestal held what appeared to be an ancient, spherical device, its surface covered in unknown symbols. Defensive pattern Theta 3, Karish suggested, taking position with simulated weapons ready. Lucas ignored the standard protocol, instead moving to examine the central artifact. Interesting choice for a simulation prop. Focus on the exercise parameters, Karish warned, as the first holographic intruders approached their position. The engagement began in earnest. Simulated weapons fire filled the chamber as the programmed adversaries attacked in coordinated waves. Karish performed with textbook precision, eliminating targets with ruthless efficiency while maintaining perfect positioning. Lucas, however, seemed distracted. He fought with minimal effort, his attention repeatedly drawn to the central artifact, even as he dispatched attackers. Your performance is compromised, Karish called out, after 10 minutes of sustained combat. The statistical probability of successful defense is decreasing. That's because we're playing their game, Lucas replied, ducking behind a pillar as enemy fire intensified. Time to change the rules. Before Karish could respond, Lucas rolled from cover and sprinted toward the central pedestal. A barrage of simulated fire tracked his movement, but he weaved through it with uncanny precision, as though he could predict the attack patterns before they manifested. What are you doing? Karish demanded, providing covering fire despite her obvious disapproval. Lucas reached the pedestal and placed his hand on the spherical artifact. Testing a theory. The moment his skin contacted the surface, The sphere emitted a soft blue glow. The symbols etched into its surface began to rotate, rearranging themselves into new patterns. Unauthorized interaction with simulation props is prohibited. The automated system announced, "Violation logged." Lucas ignored the warning, his fingers tracing specific symbols in a sequence that seemed instinctive rather than planned. The sphere's glow intensified, pulsing in rhythm with his touch. Throughout the chamber, the holographic adversaries flickered and froze. The simulation wavered, program integrity compromised by the unexpected interaction. "System anomaly detected," the automated voice announced, a note of artificial concern entering its tone. "Security protocols engaged." The simulated enemies vanished, replaced by a red emergency lighting that bathed the chamber in crimson. On the observation deck above, Coalition officials were suddenly in motion, their previously passive monitoring now frantic activity. "What have you done?" Karish asked, approaching cautiously. Lucas stepped back from the pedestal, his expression grim. "Confirmed what I suspected. This isn't a prop, it's the real thing. An ancestral key." "That is impossible. The ancestral keys are mythological constructs. Tell that to the very real security lockdown we just triggered." Lucas gestured toward the sealed chamber doors. "And the very nervous Coalition officials who just realized their harmless historical artifact responded to human DNA." Karish's scales had darkened to a deep blue, almost black. "The keys are said to respond only to those who created them." "Yeah, about that." Lucas met her gaze directly. "There's a lot about human history the Coalition has conveniently edited from the official records." Before Karish could respond, the chamber doors slid open, revealing a contingent of Coalition security officers, led by a tall, gray-skinned humanoid with symmetrical cranial ridges, a Varathi, one of the founding species of the Galactic Coalition. "Participant Brandt," the Varathi stated, its voice modulated to perfect neutrality. "Your presence is required for debriefing. The anomaly must be documented." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Just an anomaly? Not going to mention that your historical artifact is actually a quantum-locked ancestral key that shouldn't react to any living species' DNA?" The Varathi's expression remained impassive, but Lucas noted the subtle shift in its stance, the equivalent of surprise in its species' body language. "Your observations will be recorded during debriefing," it stated. "Please comply without delay." Lucas glanced at Karish, who stood watching the exchange with intense focus. "Looks like our training session is being cut short. Rain check on saving the galaxy?" The Zakari warrior's amber eyes narrowed. "I will submit my assessment of the exercise as required by protocol." "You do that." Lucas allowed himself to be escorted from the chamber, maintaining his casual demeanor despite the heaviness settling in his chest. They knew, or at least they suspected. The carefully constructed cover identity he'd maintained since the Zenthar conflict was beginning to unravel. The Coalition was watching him now, connecting dots they weren't supposed to find. As he passed through the security checkpoint, Lucas caught a glimpse of his reflection in the polished surface of a control panel. For a moment, the scar on his chest seemed to glow faintly beneath his training uniform. A trick of the light. Surely. Or perhaps something more. Something connected to the key, to his past, to secrets buried so deep even he didn't fully understand them. One thing was certain. The game had changed. And in the new reality taking shape around him, Lucas wasn't sure if he was a player or a pawn. The debriefing lasted 6 hours. Coalition officials from various departments took turns questioning Lucas about his interaction with the artifact, his training background, his psychological assessments, his complete medical history. He provided the answers in his file, the sanitized version of his military service that omitted any reference to Special Operations Division Black Echo, the classified human unit that officially never existed. They knew he was lying. He knew they couldn't prove it. It was nearly midnight by station time when Lucas finally returned to his quarters. He expected to find Karish either absent or pretending to be deep in meditation, their usual pattern of mutual avoidance. Instead, she was waiting for him, standing in the center of the room with an unusual stillness, even for a Zakari. "Your debriefing was extensive," she observed as the door closed behind him. Lucas shrugged, moving to his storage unit to retrieve a protein concentrate. "They had a lot of questions about the simulation. Apparently, I broke some expensive equipment. You activated an ancestral key." Karish's tone was flat, her amber eyes unblinking. "A device that, according to Coalition historical records, should be inert to all known species." "Technical malfunction," Lucas replied, mixing the protein powder with water. "They're blaming it on a sensor calibration error." "That is the official explanation. But you don't believe it." Karish moved closer, her scaled form catching the room's low lighting in iridescent patterns. "During your absence, I accessed the restricted archives using my elite guard clearance. I reviewed the footage from the artifacts chamber." Lucas took a long sip of his drink, watching her over the rim of the container. "Find anything interesting?" "The key responded to your genetic signature on a quantum level. This is not possible unless—" She paused, her secondary arms unfolding slightly, a sign of agitation. "Unless the legends are true." "Legends tend to be exaggerated." Lucas set down his drink. "Whatever you think you saw, I saw a human activate technology created by the ancestors. Technology that, according to all Coalition science, should recognize no living DNA pattern." Karish's voice had dropped to a lower register. "The only explanation consistent with observational evidence is that humans are more closely related to the ancestors than the Coalition has acknowledged." Lucas leaned against the wall, his casual posture betrayed by the tension in his shoulders. "That's a pretty big leap from one malfunctioning artifact." "It is not the only evidence." Karish gestured to his chest, where the scar lay hidden beneath his uniform. "The mark of the flame bearer, the reaction of the key, your combat techniques, which match no known human military training profile." Her eyes narrowed. "You are not what your file claims." For a long moment, Lucas considered maintaining the facade. It had served him well for years, the persona of a traumatized but otherwise ordinary Special Forces veteran, damaged but not dangerous. But something in Karish's directness struck a chord. Perhaps it was time for a calculated risk. "Neither are you," he said quietly. "Your file says you're here as part of a standard cultural exchange, but Zakari elite guards don't participate in peace programs. They're sent to gather intelligence or eliminate threats." Karish's scales darkened, confirmation he'd hit the mark. "So," Lucas continued, "the question becomes, which one am I to the Zakari High Matriarchy? Intelligence target or elimination objective?" "That depends on what you truly are," Karish replied, her posture shifting subtly. "And whose interests you serve." Lucas smiled without humor. "Would you believe me if I said my own?" "No species serves only itself in the greater galactic game." Karish's head tilted, studying him with renewed intensity. "Especially not one with connections to the ancestors." "I don't work for anyone anymore." Lucas met her gaze directly. "Not Earth Command, not the Coalition, and certainly not the ghosts of some long-dead civilization." "Then explain the key's response. Explain how you knew exactly which sequence to input, a sequence not documented in any Coalition record." Lucas hesitated, weighing his options. The truth was classified beyond any level Karish would have access to, buried in redacted files and erased missions. But a partial truth might serve better than a complete lie. "I was part of a specialized unit," he began, choosing his words carefully. "One that officially never existed. We were tasked with recovering and studying pre-Coalition artifacts, particularly those that seemed to respond to human interaction." "Black Echo," Karish said, the name sending a jolt through Lucas's system. The shadow unit responsible for the Proxima incident. Lucas kept his expression neutral, despite his surprise. That name isn't in any files you could access. It is not in Coalition files, Karish agreed. It is in Zakari intelligence records. Your unit was responsible for the destruction of a Zakari research outpost in the Proxima system, the same incident that gave you that scar. Your information is incomplete, Lucas said, a coldness entering his voice. That research outpost was developing biological weapons designed specifically to target human neural pathways. My team was sent to investigate. We found test subjects, humans, kept in conditions that violated every coalition law on sentient rights. Karish's scales shifted, rippling between colors in a pattern Lucas couldn't interpret. This is not in our records. Convenient omissions seem to be a specialty of both our governments. Lucas pushed himself away from the wall, moving to stand directly before her. My team was betrayed, not by the Zakari, but by our own command. The outpost was rigged to self-destruct once we transmitted confirmation of the weapons program. We were meant to die there, eliminating both the evidence and the witnesses. Yet you survived. 3 of us did. Out of 12. Lucas's hand unconsciously moved to the scar on his chest. We were recovered by a coalition medical ship that responded to the automated distress signal. By the time we were stable enough for debriefing, the official story had already been written. Accident at an abandoned research facility. No evidence of wrongdoing. Tragic loss of a specialized exploration team. And the survivors? Officially listed as suffering from traumatic stress and hallucinations. Our testimony was classified as unreliable. We were separated, given new identities in the system, and assigned to rehabilitation programs. Lucas's smile was bitter. Like this one. Karish was silent for a long moment, processing the information. If what you say is true, why have you not sought justice? Humans are known for their persistence in such matters. Justice, Lucas laughed, the sound hollow. Against whom? The human commanders who sent us to die are protected by security classifications so high, even most of Earth's government doesn't know they exist. The Zakari researchers evacuated before the explosion, their identities erased from official records. The coalition officials who helped cover it up are distributed across a dozen worlds, insulated by layers of bureaucracy. Then what do you seek? The question caught Lucas off guard. What did he want? Survival had been his only goal for so long that he'd stopped considering alternatives. I don't know, he admitted finally. I've been running on autopilot, following orders, keeping my head down, staying alive one day at a time. Until today, Karish observed, when you deliberately activated the key, knowing it would draw attention. Lucas met her gaze. I didn't plan that. It was instinctive. As was your combat technique. As was your knowledge of the activation sequence. Karish moved closer, studying him with unsettling intensity. These are not coincidences. No, Lucas agreed quietly. They're not. What are you, Lucas Brandt? The question hung between them, weighted with implications beyond its simple words. Lucas found himself wanting to answer truthfully, a dangerous impulse he hadn't felt in years. I'm what's left when everything else is burned away, he said finally. A soldier without an army, a weapon without a wielder, a survivor carrying fragments of knowledge I shouldn't have, abilities I can't explain, and memories that sometimes don't feel like my own. Karish's amber eyes seemed to look through him rather than at him. The prophecies speak of one who carries the memories of the ancestors, one who will awaken what was hidden. I'm not your prophesied savior, Lucas said, weariness creeping into his voice. I'm just a man with too many questions and not enough answers. Perhaps, Karish replied, her scales shifting to a calmer blue. Or perhaps that is precisely what the Harbinger would say. Before Lucas could respond, The station's alert system activated, bathing their quarters in pulsing red light. Attention all personnel. Security breach in progress. Unidentified vessels have breached outer defenses. This is not a drill. All participants report to designated shelter areas. Security teams to battle stations. Lucas and Karish exchanged glances. The conversation instantly set aside in favor of immediate survival concerns. Convenient timing, Lucas muttered, moving to retrieve the small kit he always kept ready beneath his sleeping platform. You believe the breach is related to the key incident? Karish asked. Already arming herself with the ceremonial blades Zakari were permitted to carry even in peace zones. I believe there are no coincidences in the coalition. Lucas checked the contents of his emergency pack. Medical supplies, survival tools, encrypted communication device. Especially not when ancestral technology is involved. The station shuddered as something impacted its outer shields. The lights flickered momentarily before stabilizing. The designated shelter for our sector is 3 levels down, Karish noted, consulting the emergency protocol display. Lucas shook his head. Shelter areas are the first places they'll look. They? Whoever's attacking. Lucas slung the pack over his shoulder. If it's Coalition Black Ops coming to clean up loose ends after the key incident, they'll have the shelter manifests. If it's someone else after the key, they'll have informants in station security directing them to high-value targets. Which we now are, Karish concluded, her tactical assessment aligning with his, despite their different backgrounds. Which I've always been, Lucas corrected. You're just caught in the blast radius. Another impact rocked the station, stronger than the first. The environmental systems fluctuated, sending a brief surge of cold air through the quarters before normalizing. We should move, Karish said, her predatory instincts clearly on high alert. This position is indefensible. Lucas nodded, moving toward the door. We need to get to level 9. The maintenance corridors run throughout the station without security checkpoints. You seem unusually familiar with the station's layout for someone who arrived less than a month ago. First rule of special ops, always know your exits. Lucas checked the corridor before stepping out. Even from places you're not supposed to leave. They moved through the rapidly emptying hallways, other participants hurrying toward the designated shelter areas. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow. The station's automated announcements continuing to instruct personnel to follow evacuation protocols. As they approached the service elevator that would take them to level 9, a squad of Coalition security officers rounded the corner, weapons drawn. Participants, the lead officer called out. This area is restricted during emergency protocols. Return to your designated shelter immediately. Lucas assessed the situation in an instant. The officers' uniforms were correct, but their weapons weren't standard issue. They were carrying focused pulse rifles, military grade rather than security models. Of course, officers, he said, raising his hands in apparent compliance. We got turned around in the confusion. As the squad approached, Lucas noticed their formation. Too tight, too aggressive for a simple escort. These weren't station security. They were trained strike team operatives using security uniforms as cover. Participant Brandt, the lead officer said, his voice flat. You are to come with us for special protection measures. Special protection, Lucas echoed, buying time as he signaled Karish with subtle hand movements. A combat language she wouldn't recognize but might intuitively understand as preparation. Your interaction with sensitive artifacts has made you a potential target, the officer explained, the lie smooth, but detectable in his overly measured speech. We are instructed to escort you to a secure facility. Lucas smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. You know, it's funny. I don't remember giving my name. The squad tensed, realizing their mistake too late. Lucas moved. The first officer went down before he could raise his weapon, a precision strike to the throat collapsing his windpipe. The second managed to bring his rifle up, but Karish was already in motion, her superior speed allowing her to close the distance and disable him with a devastating blow to his central nervous cluster. The remaining 3 officers opened fire, energy pulses sizzling through the air where Lucas and Karish had been standing a fraction of a second earlier. But both had anticipated the response, using the confined space of the corridor to their advantage. Lucas rolled under the barrage, coming up inside the nearest officer's guard and redirecting his weapon. The pulse, meant for Lucas instead, hit the 4th officer, the energy blast burning through his disguised armor. Karish dispatched the final attacker with terrifying efficiency, her natural weapons proving more effective at close range than any technology. The entire encounter had lasted less than 10 seconds. "Not station security," Karish observed, examining one of the fallen attackers. "These are military-grade implants. Enhancements prohibited in coalition peacekeeping forces." "Black Ops," Lucas confirmed, retrieving one of the pulse rifles and checking its charge. "Someone's not taking any chances. The question remains, who sent them?" Lucas knelt beside the lead attacker, searching for identification. He found nothing except a small symbol tattooed at the base of the man's skull, a geometric pattern arranged in concentric circles. "Purist faction," he muttered, recognizing the mark from intelligence briefings. "Extremists who believe the coalition should be purged of destabilizing elements." "Humans are not typically targeted by purists," Karish noted. "They consider your species primitive, but ultimately harmless." "They're not after me because I'm human." Lucas stood, rifle ready. "They're after me because I'm not human enough for their liking." Before Karish could respond, another explosion rocked the station, this one much closer than the previous impacts. Emergency bulkheads began closing throughout the sector, the station's automated systems attempting to contain potential hull breaches. "We need to move," Lucas urged, heading for the maintenance access panel near the disabled elevator. "Once these bulkheads seal, we'll be trapped." Karish followed without argument, her tactical assessment evidently matching his own. Lucas pried open the panel, revealing a narrow service shaft designed for maintenance drones rather than humanoid access. "This will be constraining," Karish observed, eyeing the tight space. "Freedom often is," Lucas replied, slipping into the shaft. "Come on. It widens after the first junction." They navigated the maintenance system as the station continued to shudder under attack. Through small viewports in the service tunnels, they caught glimpses of the battle, sleek, unmarked vessels firing precisely targeted weapons at specific sections of the station. Not a random attack or pirate raid, but a surgical strike with clear objectives. "They're targeting the artifacts wing," Karish noted, as they paused at a junction. "And the central command hub." "They want the key," Lucas confirmed. "And they want to make sure no one can call for help while they take it. The Coalition Defense Fleet will respond regardless." "Not if they don't know what's happening." Lucas pointed to a communications relay, visible through the viewport. "Look, the quantum communication array is offline. They've cut the station's faster-than-light communications. By the time conventional signals reach the nearest Coalition outpost, the attackers will be gone," Karish finished, "with whatever they came for." Lucas nodded, checking the maintenance system's basic terminal for station status. "The artifacts wing is already breached. They're moving with precision. They knew exactly where the security systems were weakest." "Inside information," Karish concluded. "They have allies within the Coalition structure." "Or they are the Coalition structure," Lucas said grimly. "The Purist faction has supporters at the highest levels. This could be an officially unauthorized but tacitly supported operation." "To what end?" Lucas met her amber gaze. "To eliminate evidence that humans might have a connection to the ancestors. The Purists have built their ideology on the belief that certain species, including their own, are inherently superior due to their genetic purity. If humans turn out to have links to the civilization that predates the Coalition itself, their entire worldview collapses," Karish finished, understanding dawning in her expression. "But why would the Coalition leadership allow this? The potential knowledge gained from ancestral technology." is outweighed by the potential social disruption, Lucas interrupted. The coalition was founded on principles of ordered hierarchy, species classifications, development tiers, evolutionary categories, all carefully constructed to maintain the status quo. If those classifications were revealed to be artificial or manipulated. Another explosion, closer this time, cut off his explanation. The maintenance shaft trembled, dust and debris falling from loosened panels. We need to reach the artifact's wing, Lucas decided, already moving down the connecting tunnel. If they get the key and whatever else they're after, we'll never learn the truth. The wing will be heavily defended, both by station security and the attackers, Karish pointed out. That's why we're not going through the front entrance. Lucas paused at another junction, consulting his mental map of the station. There's a secondary access point through the environmental control system. It's not on the official schematics. Karish's scales shifted to a suspicious purple. How do you know this? Let's just say Black Echo's mission parameters included contingency planning for every facility we entered. Lucas didn't wait for her response, already navigating the increasingly narrow passages toward their destination. They emerged from the maintenance system into a dimly lit technical area filled with atmospheric processing equipment. The sounds of battle were more distant here, muffled by layers of insulation and reinforced bulkheads. The artifacts wing is through that service corridor, Lucas indicated, checking the pulse rifle he'd acquired. It'll lead us to the secondary storage area, behind the main exhibition hall, where the most dangerous items would be kept, Karish noted. Exactly. Lucas moved toward the corridor, then paused, turning back to face the Zakari warrior. This is where we part ways. Karish's head tilted in surprise. Explain. What happens next won't be sanctioned by any coalition protocol. I'm going after the key, and anyone who tries to take it. Lucas's expression was grim. You're Zakari Elite Guard. Your duty is to the matriarchy and, by extension, to coalition law. You believe I would report your actions. I believe you'll be forced to choose between your duty and whatever this is. Lucas gestured between them. And I won't put you in that position. Karish studied him for a long moment, her amber eyes unreadable. Among the Zakari, there is a concept called kavrash, the bond formed between warriors who have shared blood in battle. It supersedes political allegiance or hierarchical duty. We haven't exactly shared blood in battle, Lucas pointed out. We eliminated a strike team together, Karish countered. And as for blood, she extended one clawed hand, deliberately drawing the edge across her palm. Indigo fluid welled from the self-inflicted wound. Blood offered freely creates the strongest bonds. Lucas stared at the gesture, recognizing its significance from his limited knowledge of Zakari culture. Blood rituals were sacred, performed only in the most serious circumstances. I'm not the prophesied one you think I am, he said quietly. Perhaps not, Karish agreed. But you are someone worth following into battle. Someone seeking truth in a system built on carefully constructed lies. That is enough. After a moment's hesitation, Lucas drew the utility blade from his emergency kit and made a shallow cut across his own palm. He extended his hand, clasping Karish's in the ancient warrior gesture. If we survive this, he said, drinks are on me. Karish's scales rippled with what might have been the Zakari equivalent of amusement. If we survive this, human, much more than beverages will be exchanged. They moved through the service corridor with practiced stealth, the sounds of conflict growing louder as they approached the artifact's wing. Through ventilation grates, they glimpsed scenes of the battle. Coalition security forces engaged with unmarked commandos in matte black armor. The fighting was intense but contained, focused around key areas rather than spreading throughout the station. Precision strike, Lucas whispered as they paused at a junction. They're not interested in taking the station, just specific objectives. The key being primary among them, Karish agreed. They reached the access point to the secondary storage area, a maintenance hatch designed for equipment transfer rather than personnel. Lucas worked quickly to override the security protocols, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency across the control panel. "You have experience with coalition security systems," Karish observed. "Let's just say they haven't changed their base encryption as much as they think they have." The panel blinked green, and the hatch slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss. "After you." They entered a dimly lit storage chamber, filled with artifacts in various containment units, objects deemed too sensitive or dangerous for public display. Unlike the exhibition areas, these items had minimal descriptive information, identified only by alphanumeric codes. "The key won't be here," Lucas said, scanning the room. "They'll have moved it to a more secure location after the incident." "Unless that was the plan," Karish suggested. "Create a security event that requires relocation, then strike during transfer when protocols are compromised." Lucas nodded appreciatively. "You think like a Black Echo operative." "I think like a hunter," Karish corrected, her heightened senses alert for any movement. "And we are not alone." The warning came just as the lights in the storage area cut out completely, plunging them into darkness. Lucas switched to thermal vision mode on the pulse rifle's targeting system, scanning for heat signatures. He found 3 humanoid figures moving with military precision through the rows of containment units. Their thermal signatures were muted, indicating advanced stealth gear designed to mask body heat. Lucas signaled their positions to Karish, who nodded in understanding. Her species could see into the infrared spectrum naturally, giving her an advantage in the darkness. They separated, each taking a different approach vector toward the intruders. Lucas moved silently between the storage units, years of special operations training guiding his movements. The pulse rifle remained at ready position, though he knew that firing in a room full of potentially volatile artifacts was a last resort. The first intruder never saw him coming. Lucas disabled him with a precise strike to the base of the skull, catching the unconscious body before it could hit the floor and make noise. He dragged it behind a containment unit, quickly searching for identification or mission parameters. What he found instead was a neural interface module, military grade, but with modifications he didn't recognize. He pocketed it for later analysis and continued his advance. Karish had already neutralized the second intruder when Lucas located the third, who proved more challenging than his companions. As Lucas approached, the figure spun with inhuman speed, a vibroblade materializing in his hand. "Project S9, the intruder said, his voice distorted by a vocal modulator. "You were predicted to interfere." Lucas froze momentarily, the designation triggering a cascade of fragmented memories. S9. A laboratory. Pain beyond description. Genetic sequencing. Neural rewiring. A program he'd been told was decommissioned decades ago. The momentary distraction nearly cost him his life. The intruder lunged, the vibroblade humming as it sliced through the air where Lucas's throat had been a fraction of a second earlier. Lucas countered with a combination of moves that flowed together with inhuman precision, a combat style that had never been taught to him, yet felt as natural as breathing. The intruder matched him initially, his augmented reflexes evident in the fluid response to Lucas's attack. But where the intruder relied on technological enhancement, Lucas moved with something else, an instinctive understanding of combat that transcended training. Each strike connected with devastating precision, targeting nerve clusters and weakness points with unerring accuracy. The intruder fell, disabled but conscious. Lucas knelt beside him, removing the tactical helmet to reveal a young face with the distinctive cranial ridges of a Varathi, one of the Coalition's founding species. "Who sent you?" Lucas demanded. The Varathi's eyes were unfocused, the neural enhancements visible as faint blue lines beneath his skin. "The purity directive will not be compromised. The natural order must be preserved. By stealing ancestral technology. Doesn't seem very pure to me." "Not stealing," Containing. Eliminating. The Varathi's gaze sharpened momentarily. As you should have been, S9. The project was a mistake. An abomination. Lucas felt Karish approach, but kept his attention on the fallen operative. What do you know about Project S9? Human hubris. Attempting to reclaim what was deliberately buried. The Varathi's voice was fading, his systems clearly shutting down. A failsafe to prevent capture. The connection was severed for a reason. The ancestors are not what you think. What connection? What was severed? Lucas pressed. Sensing the operative had only moments of consciousness remaining. The Varathi's eyes locked on Lucas's one final time. Ask yourself why the key responded to you. Ask yourself what lives in your DNA that should have remained dormant. The Purity Directive protects the Coalition from the truth that would destroy it. His eyes rolled back, body convulsing briefly, before going completely still. Not dead, but deeply unconscious as emergency protocols put his enhanced systems into hibernation mode. What is Project S9? Karish asked, her amber eyes fixed on Lucas. Before he could answer, the station's emergency system activated again, the automated voice taking on a new urgency. Critical breach detected in artifacts. Wing central chamber. Containment failure. Imminent. All personnel evacuate immediately. Repeat. Containment failure. Imminent. Lucas stood. Decision made. We need to get to the central chamber. Now. They navigated through the darkened storage area to an emergency exit, emerging into a corridor bathed in pulsing red warning lights. The sounds of battle had faded, replaced by the evacuation alarms and the distant rumble of energy discharges. The central artifacts chamber, where Lucas had activated the key, was located at the heart of the wing, accessible through a series of security checkpoints. But the attacking force had eliminated those obstacles, leaving a trail of disabled security systems and neutralized defenders in their wake. They encountered no resistance as they approached the chamber's massive entrance doors, now partially melted from concentrated energy weapons. Too easy, Lucas muttered, slowing his advance. They wanted to create a clear path, then withdraw. A trap, Karish agreed, her senses on high alert. Or a calculated sacrifice. They entered the chamber cautiously, weapons ready. The circular room had been transformed since their training exercise. The ceremonial pillars remained, but the central pedestal, now connected to a complex array of equipment, technology that looked distinctly non-coalition in design. And at its center, the key hovered in a containment field, pulsing with energy that sent waves of blue light cascading across the chamber. They've activated it, Lucas realized, recognizing the patterns in the energy field. But they couldn't control it. Hence the evacuation order, Karish added, scanning the room for threats. They've initiated a process they cannot stop. Lucas approached the containment field, studying the equipment connected to the key. This isn't purist technology. It's older, much older. Ancestral? No. Lucas shook his head, a strange certainty guiding his assessment. Something in between. Someone trying to bridge current technology with ancestral principles, without fully understanding either. The key's pulsing had increased in frequency, the symbols on its surface rotating more rapidly. The containment field flickered as energy levels continued to rise. We should withdraw, Karish suggested, eyeing the unstable field. The containment failure warning was accurate, but Lucas felt drawn to the key. The same instinctive connection he'd experienced during the training exercise, pulling him forward. I can stabilize it. How? I don't know, he admitted, but I know I can. Before Karish could respond, Lucas reached toward the containment field. The energy parted around his hand like water, allowing him to touch the key directly. The moment of contact sent a surge of information flooding through his consciousness. Images, knowledge, memories that weren't his yet, somehow were. The symbols on the key aligned, locking into a specific configuration. The pulsing energy stabilized, condensing into a tightly controlled field around the artifact. And then, the key spoke, not in words but in concepts that formed themselves into language in Lucas's mind. Protocol recognition confirmed, genetic signature verified, security parameters accepted. Welcome, inheritor. The voice echoed in Lucas's consciousness, ancient and somehow familiar. He found himself responding without consciously forming the words. What am I inheriting? The truth, the legacy, the responsibility, the sins of the ancestors and the means to atone for them. Images flooded his mind. A civilization spanning galaxies, technology beyond current understanding, and a terrible mistake that led to their downfall. Hubris. Experimentation with the fundamental forces of reality. A catastrophe that threatened to unmake existence itself. And a solution, desperate, controversial, ethically questionable. The dispersion of their genetic material across promising species throughout the galaxy. A way to preserve what they were, hidden within the DNA of 1,000 different life forms, waiting for the right combination of circumstances to reawaken. Humans were not their only inheritors, but they were among the most compatible, their genetic structure able to accommodate the dormant sequences with minimal disruption. Project S9 hadn't created something new. It had awakened something very, very old. The revelation struck Lucas with physical force, driving him to his knees as the key continued to pour information into his mind. His identity, the person he'd believed himself to be, was both real and not real. Lucas Brandt existed, but he carried within him the awakened consciousness of something far older. "Lucas!" Karish's voice seemed distant, though she knelt beside him. "You must break contact. The energy readings are becoming critical." With immense effort, Lucas pulled his hand away from the key. The flow of information ceased, but what he'd already received remained, integrating itself with his existing memories and knowledge. The key continued to hover in its stabilized field, but now displayed a new configuration of symbols, a message only Lucas could understand. "We need to go," he said, his voice strained. "This isn't over. It's just beginning." As if in response to his words, a new alarm sounded throughout the station. A voice, not the automated system, but a live announcement, echoed through the communication network. "Attention all Coalition personnel. This is High Strategist Vorin of the Purity Directive. A Level 1 contamination event has been confirmed in the Artifacts Wing. Purification protocol is now active. The station will be cleansed in 15 minutes. All loyal Coalition citizens have been evacuated. I repeat, purification protocol is now active." Lucas and Karish exchanged glances, the implications immediately clear. "They're going to destroy the entire station," Lucas said. "With everyone still on board." "Not everyone," Karish corrected. "Their operatives would have been evacuated first. Only those deemed expendable or contaminated remain. Including us." Lucas looked back at the key, its glow now pulsating in rhythm with the emergency lights. "We need to get to the emergency shuttle bay on Level 2. That route will be heavily guarded or disabled," Karish pointed out. Lucas's expression hardened, a new determination settling over him as the integrated knowledge from the key aligned with his military training. "Then we make our own exit." He turned to the control panel nearest the containment field, his fingers moving across the interface with certainty that came from elsewhere. Ancient commands merged with current technology as he bypassed security protocols and accessed systems far beyond his clearance level. "What are you doing?" Karish asked, watching in fascination. "Waking up the station." Lucas's eyes reflected the blue glow of the terminal, as previously hidden interfaces revealed themselves. Peaceward Station isn't just a diplomatic outpost. It's built around an ancestral defense platform, one the Coalition repurposed without fully understanding its capabilities. The chamber hummed with new energy as dormant systems activated throughout the station. On the main display, a schematic appeared showing the full extent of the hidden infrastructure, weapon systems, shield generators, and propulsion technology that had been deliberately concealed beneath layers of more recent construction. How is this possible? Karish's scales had shifted to a pale blue of astonishment. The Coalition has occupied this station for centuries. They built around what they found, Lucas explained, continuing to access deeper levels of the system. Used what they could understand, buried what they couldn't, but they never had the activation keys, genetic or technological. On secondary screens, security feeds showed the remaining purest forces reacting with alarm as systems they didn't control began activating throughout the station. Doors sealed, corridors rerouted, and defensive measures deployed against unauthorized personnel. "I've locked them out," Lucas announced, finishing the command sequence, "and secured us a path to Docking Bay 7. There's a scout vessel there with ancestral tech integrated into its systems. It'll respond to me." "And the purification protocol?" Lucas's expression darkened. "Still counting down. I can't deactivate it remotely. The trigger mechanism is isolated on their command ship. But I can give everyone else a chance to evacuate." He activated the station-wide communication system, overriding the Purist Directives channel. "Attention all personnel. This is Lucas Brandt, Special Operations Division. The evacuation order is legitimate. The station will self-destruct in approximately 12 minutes. All emergency escape pods are now unlocked and operational. Repeat, this is not a drill. Proceed to your nearest evacuation point immediately." Throughout the station, the message repeated in multiple languages as Lucas released the security lockdowns on all escape systems. On the monitors, they watched as remaining personnel rushed toward escape pods and emergency shuttles. "We should move," Karish urged, eyeing the countdown display. Lucas nodded, but turned back to the key one last time. "We can't leave this behind. The knowledge it contains, it's too important." "It is also what they want," Karish pointed out. "Taking it makes us targets beyond this station." "We already are." Lucas reached into the containment field, which once again parted around his hand. The key responded to his touch, the energy field collapsing as the artifact settled into his palm, warm and somehow alive against his skin. "The difference is, now we'll have answers." The key shrank, its physical form condensing until it was small enough to fit in his pocket, another capability the Coalition had never discovered. Lucas secured it and turned to Karish. "Ready to become the most wanted fugitives in Coalition space?" The Zakari warrior's scales rippled with colors that suggested both amusement and anticipation. It would be disappointing to survive a station self-destruct, only to live an unremarkable life afterward. They moved through the now empty corridors, following the route Lucas had programmed into the station's systems. Emergency lighting guided their way as the evacuation continued around them, the remaining personnel too focused on their own survival to question the sudden assistance. Docking Bay 7 was located in a restricted section of the station, accessible only to high-ranking Coalition officials under normal circumstances. But the awakened systems recognized Lucas's genetic signature, opening sealed doorways and bypassing security checkpoints that would have otherwise required multiple authorizations. They encountered a final Purist strike team guarding the approach to the bay, 6 operatives with enhanced combat capabilities. But with Lucas's awakened abilities and Karish's natural combat prowess, the encounter was brief and decisive. The scout vessel waited in the docking bay, sleek, black, and clearly designed for stealth operations rather than diplomatic missions. Its hull bore minimal markings, identifying it as a special projects vessel rather than standard Coalition transport. "How did you know this would be here?" Karish asked, as they approached. "I didn't," Lucas admitted, placing his hand on the entry panel. "But I knew the Purists would have emergency extraction capabilities for high-value assets. And I knew it would be something compatible with ancestral technology." The vessel responded to his touch, the entry hatch sliding open with a soft hiss. Inside, the cockpit was a blend of modern coalition design and much older interfaces, technology that had been carefully integrated to work with systems beyond current understanding. Lucas took the pilot's position, his hands moving across the controls with increasing confidence as the knowledge from the key continued to integrate with his consciousness. Karish secured the hatch and took the secondary station, adapting quickly to the unfamiliar configuration. Station destruction in 5 minutes. The automated countdown announced. All personnel should have evacuated. Repeat, station destruction imminent. Lucas activated the vessel's systems, which responded with an eagerness that suggested intelligence beyond standard navigational computers. The docking clamps released, and the ship hovered in the bay as the external doors began to open. "The Purist command vessel will detect our launch," Karish warned, monitoring the tactical display. "They have superior firepower and numbers." "They have conventional weapons," Lucas corrected, a slight smile playing at his lips. "We have something else." As the scout ship cleared the docking bay, the full tactical situation became apparent. The Purist fleet consisted of 5 vessels, arranged in standard attack formation around the station. Their weapons powered down, now that the purification protocol was counting down. The command ship, a sleek dreadnought-class vessel bearing no official coalition markings, held position at what its commanders clearly considered a safe distance from the impending destruction. Lucas guided their stolen craft away from the station, heading directly toward the nearest jump point for faster-than-light travel. As expected, the Purist vessels immediately detected them. "Unidentified vessel departing Peaceward Station," a stern voice announced over the communication system. "You are ordered to stand down and prepare for boarding. This is your only warning." Lucas opened a channel but transmitted no visual. "This is Scout Vessel Ancestral Inheritance to Purist Command. We have what you were looking for, and we know what you're trying to hide. If you value your secrets, you'll let us pass." The response was immediate, weapon systems activating across all 5 enemy vessels. "Offensive posture detected," Karish reported. "They are targeting our engines." As expected, Lucas's hands danced across the controls, accessing systems that had lain dormant within the scout ship's integrated technology. "Let's show them what they're really dealing with." The scout vessel's conventional engines cut out as something else took over. Propulsion technology that operated on principles the Coalition had never mastered. The ship accelerated at a rate that should have crushed its occupants, but an inertial field protected them from the forces involved. Behind them, the Purist vessels opened fire, energy weapons and conventional projectiles tracking toward their position. But the scout ship moved with impossible agility, evading the barrage with movements that defied normal spaceflight parameters. "They cannot track us effectively," Karish observed, studying the tactical display with fascination. "Their targeting systems are not designed for these movement patterns. They're designed for ships that obey the laws of physics as the Coalition understands them," Lucas explained, guiding their vessel through maneuvers that would have torn apart a conventional craft. "We're operating on a different rulebook." The Purist command ship adjusted its position, bringing more powerful weapons to bear. A communication from High Strategist Varan himself came through, his voice cold with controlled fury. "S9, this pursuit is futile. The knowledge you have accessed is too dangerous to exist. Surrender now, and we will ensure a humane termination." Lucas didn't bother responding. Instead, he activated the final system, one that had remained hidden even from the Purists who had integrated ancestral technology into the scout vessel. A pulse of energy emanated from their ship, invisible to conventional sensors, but devastating to the specific frequencies used by Coalition weapon systems. Across the Purist fleet, targeting arrays failed, propulsion systems fluctuated, and communication networks dissolved into static. "What did you do?" Karish asked, watching as the enemy vessels drifted, temporarily disabled. "Reminded them of their limitations," Lucas replied, guiding their ship toward the jump point with renewed purpose. It won't last long. Their secondary systems will compensate. But it gives us the window we need. Behind them, Peaceward Station erupted in a carefully controlled antimatter reaction, the purification protocol, designed to eliminate all evidence of what had transpired there. The explosion was contained by specialized fields to prevent damage to surrounding space. Another example of the Coalition's precise approach to destruction. As the scout vessel reached the jump point, Lucas programmed coordinates that weren't in any standard navigation database. Location information extracted from the key's vast repository. "Where are we going?" Karish asked, as the faster-than-light drive engaged. "To find answers," Lucas said, the stars stretching around them as they accelerated beyond conventional physics. And maybe some old friends. The ship vanished into hyperspace, just as the purest vessels regained partial functionality, their sensors tracking the energy signature, but unable to follow without proper coordinates. On the command ship, High Strategist Varan watched the tactical display with an expression of cold calculation. The loss of the key was unfortunate, but not unexpected. The emergence of an activated S9 subject was more concerning, particularly one with access to functional ancestral technology. "Dispatch hunter teams to all probable emergence vectors," he ordered. "Priority Alpha. The contamination must be contained before it spreads." His second-in-command hesitated. "Sir, if the subject has indeed accessed ancestral knowledge repositories, our conventional hunter teams may be insufficient." Voran's expression didn't change, but a dangerous light entered his eyes. "Then, we will use unconventional means. Activate the Omega Protocol. The purity of the Coalition must be preserved, regardless of cost." As the orders went out, Voran turned his attention to a secure terminal, accessing files that existed in no official database. Project S9. The Coalition's attempt to understand and control the dormant ancestral genetic sequences discovered in certain human bloodlines. A project officially terminated after the test subjects demonstrated capabilities beyond the parameters of safe containment. But one subject had escaped the termination order. Subject Lucas Brandt, Special Operations Division, Black Echo Unit, believed neutralized in the Proxima incident. His body never recovered from the wreckage. Now he had returned, awakened, and in possession of both an ancestral key and a Zakari elite guard warrior, a combination dangerous enough to threaten the carefully maintained order of the entire Coalition. Voran closed the file. His decision made, the Omega Protocol would be expensive and risky, but necessary. Some threats could not be allowed to develop, regardless of the potential knowledge that might be lost in their elimination. The purity of the Coalition would be maintained, at any cost. The scout vessel emerged from hyperspace near an unremarkable dwarf star on the outer edges of Coalition space. The system contained no habitable planets, no mining operations, no strategic value of any kind. Precisely why Lucas had selected it. "We should be safe here temporarily," he explained, guiding the ship into orbit around a barren moon. "Minimal traffic, no regular patrols, and the stellar radiation will help mask our energy signature." Karish studied the navigation display with interest. "You seem familiar with evading Coalition detection protocols." "Black Echo specialized in operating where we weren't supposed to be." Lucas initiated the ship's passive scanning systems, searching for any signs of pursuit. But this is more than standard evasion tactics. The key provided coordinates for safe harbors, places the ancestors established that were never discovered or have been forgotten. "And this is one such location?" "A waypoint," Lucas explained, bringing up a more detailed scan of the seemingly empty space around them. "There's something here that doesn't appear on conventional sensors." He adjusted the ship's detection systems, incorporating parameters from the knowledge he'd absorbed from the key. The display shifted, revealing what appeared to be a small structure embedded in the moon's surface, invisible to standard coalition scanning technology. A sanctuary, he continued, built by those who came before and designed to remain hidden from those who came after. Karish leaned forward, studying the readings with obvious fascination. The structure appears ancient, yet the energy signature is active. They built things to last. Lucas guided the ship toward the revealed location. And to wait. As they approached, a section of the moon's surface shimmered and dissolved, revealing an entrance to a concealed docking facility. The scout vessel's systems interfaced seamlessly with the hidden structure, guiding them into a landing bay that sealed behind them with the same optical camouflage technology. The interior was surprisingly well preserved, a stark contrast to the barren wasteland outside. Soft illumination activated as they disembarked, responding to Lucas's presence. The architecture was unlike anything in Coalition design, flowing lines and organic curves that somehow managed to feel both alien and familiar. "This facility has been waiting for thousands of years," Karish observed, her scales shifting to a deep indigo of wonder. "Yet it functions as if it were constructed yesterday." "Different understanding of physics, different approach to engineering," Lucas explained, following an intuitive path through the structure. The ancestors built for permanence, not planned obsolescence. They entered what appeared to be a central chamber, a circular room with a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time representation of the surrounding star system. At its center stood a pedestal similar to the one that had held the key on Peaceward Station. Lucas removed the key from his pocket, where it had remained dormant since their escape. As he approached the pedestal, the artifact began to pulse with renewed energy, the symbols on its surface rotating into new configurations. "It recognizes this place," he said, placing the key on the pedestal. The response was immediate. The entire facility hummed with awakening systems as the key established connection with its long-dormant counterpart. The dome above shifted, stars and planets giving way to streams of data and images that flowed around them in three-dimensional representation. "What is this?" Karish asked, watching as the information surrounded them like a living entity. "History," Lucas replied, his consciousness expanding as the key facilitated deeper connection with the facility's knowledge repositories. "The true history of the Coalition, of Earth, of the ancestors, of everything that came before and everything that was hidden after." The images coalesced into coherent sequences. The rise of an ancient civilization that had mastered technologies modern species could barely comprehend. Their expansion across galaxies, their philosophical debates about intervention versus observation, their eventual schism over the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. And then, the catastrophe, an experiment with the fabric of reality that created a cascading failure in the underlying structure of the universe. A threat, not just to their civilization, but to existence itself. "They tore something," Lucas narrated, as the images showed the desperation of the final days. "A fundamental breach between dimensions. They couldn't repair it directly, so they created a different solution." The display shifted to show genetic manipulation on a massive scale, the ancestors encoding their knowledge, their abilities, and their consciousness into the DNA of promising species throughout multiple galaxies. Not clones or direct copies, but potential that could one day reawaken when the right combinations occurred naturally or through intervention. "They made themselves into a backup system," Karish realized, "distributed across thousands of bloodlines." "Exactly." Lucas watched as the final chapter unfolded. The deliberate withdrawal of the ancestors, the careful elimination of obvious evidence, the subtle guidance of developing civilizations along paths that would eventually lead to the Coalition. They knew they couldn't solve the problem in their time, so they ensured that future generations would have the tools and knowledge when the breach eventually expanded enough to threaten again. "And that time is now," Karish concluded. her tactical mind grasping the implications. The purist faction's obsession with genetic purity is not ideological, but practical. They are attempting to eliminate the ancestral genetic sequences before they can fully activate. Because activated sequences lead to individuals who can access and control ancestral technology. Lucas turned to face her directly. Technology that would disrupt the power structure they've built. The Coalition's entire hierarchy is based on a lie, that certain species are inherently superior based on their evolutionary development. But that's not how the ancestors distributed their legacy. They chose compatible hosts regardless of species classification, Karish said, the realization dawning as she watched the historical record. Zakari, humans, Varathi, dozens of others, all carrying different fragments of what the ancestors were. Lucas nodded as the display shifted again, showing the formation of the early coalition under the guidance of species who had already discovered and suppressed evidence of their shared heritage. The founders knew. They found ancestral sites, recognized the implications, and deliberately constructed a social order that would prevent the distributed consciousness from reforming. By creating artificial hierarchies that would keep potential carriers separated and in conflict. Karish's scales darkened with anger. The entire basis of Zakari superiority is as manufactured as the myth of human primitiveness, Lucas finished. We were all shaped by the same hands, carrying different pieces of the same legacy. The display above them shifted once more, focusing now on a specific genetic sequence, one that appeared in Lucas's DNA and had been deliberately activated by Project S9. But the activation had been incomplete, constrained by the limited understanding of the human scientists involved. They thought they were creating super soldiers, Lucas said, the memories of the project now integrating more fully with his consciousness. They didn't understand they were awakening something that had been waiting for millennia. And now, Karish asked, her amber eyes fixed on him with intense focus. Now I'm neither fully human nor fully ancestor, Lucas admitted. I'm something in between, with access to knowledge and abilities I'm still trying to understand. The display shifted once more, highlighting a specific area in Karish's brain structure, a region where dormant ancestral sequences lay hidden within the Zakari genetic code. You carry it too, Lucas said softly. Different fragments, different capabilities, but part of the same whole. Karish stared at the representation of her own genetic structure, visible surprise crossing her normally controlled features. This cannot be coincidence. Our assignment as roommates on Peaceward Station. No, Lucas agreed. Someone in the system recognized the compatible patterns. Someone who wanted to see what would happen when two carriers with complementary sequences were placed in proximity. But who would have such knowledge and access? Someone working against the purists from within, Lucas suggested. The ancestors planned for the long game. Distributed consciousness, distributed knowledge, distributed resistance. The facility's systems suddenly shifted to alert status, a warning flashing across the dome. External sensors had detected approaching vessels, coalition design, but without identification transponders. Hunter teams, Lucas said grimly, accessing the tactical systems. Voran isn't wasting any time. How did they find us? Karish moved to the secondary controls, her military training seamlessly adapting to the unfamiliar interface. They didn't. Not specifically. Lucas brought up a wider sensor sweep, showing similar vessels approaching other locations throughout the sector. They're conducting a systematic search of all potential hiding spots. Standard purist protocol when dealing with high-value fugitives. Can this facility's camouflage systems withstand their detection methods? Possibly, but I wouldn't count on it. Lucas initiated a security protocol, the knowledge of how to operate the ancient systems flowing naturally now. The purists have been studying ancestral technology for centuries. They know what to look for, even if they don't fully understand how it works. Then we should prepare for combat, Karish stated, her warrior instincts taking precedence. Lucas shook his head. "We're not going to fight, not yet. We're going to complete what was started." He turned back to the key, still pulsing with energy on its pedestal. The connection between his consciousness and the artifact had strengthened, allowing more direct communication with the systems it controlled. "The facility has defenses, but it also has something more important," he explained, directing the flow of information toward a specific subsection. A complete map of all ancestral sanctuaries, key repositories, and most importantly, the locations of other awakened carriers. The dome display shifted to show a galactic map marked with hundreds of points of light, some bright and pulsing, others dim and intermittent. Each light represents a carrier with active ancestral sequences, Lucas explained. Most don't know what they are or what they're capable of. The purists have been systematically eliminating them for generations, disguising the operations as accidents, conflicts, or natural disasters. "There are carriers among the Zakari," Karish noted, identifying several lights in Zakari-controlled space. "Among every species in the Coalition," Lucas confirmed. "That's why we need to reach the primary sanctuary, to broadcast an awakening signal that will activate the dormant sequences all at once, creating too many targets for the purists to eliminate." "Where is this primary sanctuary?" Lucas highlighted a location near the galactic core, a region restricted to all but the highest levels of Coalition authority. "Where it all began, the place the ancestors departed from, and where the tools to repair the dimensional breach are stored." The hunter vessels were drawing closer, their search pattern becoming more focused. The facility's defenses were prepared, but would only delay the inevitable if they were discovered. "We need to leave," Lucas decided, downloading the critical data into a portable matrix integrated with the key. "The scout vessel has the range to reach the core, but will need to navigate through heavily restricted space. The Zakari Elite Guard has protocols for such operations," Karish offered. "With your enhanced capabilities and my tactical knowledge, our probability of success is non-zero." Lucas smiled at her characteristically cautious assessment. "I'll take those odds." As they prepared to return to the scout vessel, a final set of images appeared on the dome display, a timeline showing the progressive expansion of the dimensional breach over millennia. The most recent projections indicated critical failure within 5 standard years, galactic time. "The purists know," Lucas realized, studying the data. "That's why they're accelerating their operations now. They think purging the ancestral carriers will somehow protect them from the collapse." "A fear response," Karish observed. "Eliminating those who might change the established order, even when that order itself is doomed." "Fear makes people do irrational things," Lucas agreed. "Even highly evolved, supposedly emotionless people." They returned to the scout vessel, the facility transferring additional power and technological enhancements to the ship as a final gift. The key remained with Lucas, now permanently bonded to his genetic signature and serving as both tool and weapon. As they prepared for departure, Karish paused in her pre-flight checks. "You realize that what we are attempting will destroy the Coalition as it currently exists, and potentially save every life within it," Lucas countered. "The dimensional breach doesn't care about species classifications or political structures. When it expands beyond critical threshold, everything ends. The purists will portray us as terrorists, as threats to galactic stability. They already are." Lucas initiated the launch sequence, the ship's enhanced systems humming with power beyond conventional understanding. "But I'd rather be remembered as the terrorist who tried to save existence than the loyal citizen who allowed it to end." Karish's scales shifted to a resolute blue. "Among the Zakari, there is an ancient saying, 'Better to die standing in truth than live kneeling in lies.' On Earth, we just say, 'Bro, you only live once.'" Lucas replied with a hint of his old humor. "Let's make it count." The sanctuary's camouflaged entrance opened once more, and the scout vessel launched into space just as the hunter teams began focusing their scans on the moon's surface. Their enhanced engines engaged immediately, propelling them away from the search pattern with acceleration that no conventional vessel could match. Behind them, the sanctuary activated its final protocol, a controlled quantum implosion that collapsed the entire structure into subatomic particles, leaving no evidence for the purists to discover. The hunter vessels converged on the energy signature too late, finding nothing but natural moonrock and background radiation. Lucas and Karish set course for the galactic core, the first carriers to knowingly embark on the mission the ancestors had designed into their very DNA millennia ago. The scout vessel vanished into hyperspace, carrying with it both the means to awaken the distributed consciousness of a long-gone civilization and the potential salvation for all that currently existed. On the Purist command ship, High Strategist Varan received the report of the failed interception with cold fury. The implications were clear. S9 had accessed an ancestral repository and obtained critical information. The timeline had accelerated beyond their careful plans. "Implement Omega Protocol at all carrier locations," he ordered. "No more surgical eliminations. Full purification of all potential bloodlines." His second-in-command paled. "Sir, that would mean the death of billions across multiple species." "Better billions now than everything later," Varan replied, his conviction absolute. "The purity of existence must be preserved, even if the cost is temporarily high." As the orders went out, initiating what would become the largest coordinated act of genocide in Coalition history, the race for the future of all life began in earnest. The awakened carriers speeding toward the core versus the purist forces spreading throughout the galaxy with orders to eliminate all who might oppose them. And somewhere in between, ordinary beings of all species going about their lives, unaware that the fundamental nature of their reality, and whether it would continue to exist at all, now hung in the balance. The journey to the galactic core took 17 days by the ship's chronometer. 17 days of evading purist hunter teams, navigating restricted space, and delving deeper into the knowledge the key continued to provide. For Lucas, each day brought greater integration between his human consciousness and the ancestral memories encoded in his activated DNA. He was still Lucas Brandt. His personality, his experiences, his core identity remained intact. But he now carried something more, a perspective that spanned millennia and technologies beyond current understanding. Karish underwent her own transformation. Though her ancestral sequences remained dormant, her proximity to the key and to Lucas had begun triggering subtle changes in her neural patterns. Her rigid Zakari worldview, shaped by generations of carefully constructed cultural programming, gave way to a more flexible understanding of the universe and her place within it. "The Zakari pride themselves on predatory instinct," she remarked during one of their tactical planning sessions. "Yet, I now see that we have been prey all along, manipulated by the Coalition's architects to serve as enforcers of an artificial hierarchy." "Everyone was manipulated," Lucas replied, studying the sensor data from their most recent close encounter with a purist patrol. "That's the real tragedy of the Coalition. So much potential squandered to maintain a lie." They had witnessed the first stages of the Omega Protocol during their journey, Coalition news channels reporting containment operations in regions with high concentrations of potential carriers. The euphemisms couldn't disguise the reality of what was happening: systematic elimination of entire populations based on genetic markers that most didn't even know they carried. "They're getting desperate," Lucas observed, as they monitored another announcement of a security action in a primarily human settlement. "Escalating to full population purges means they know time is running out. The breach must be expanding faster than their models predicted," Karish agreed. "Our activation of the key likely accelerated the process." The galactic core loomed ahead, a region of densely packed stars, and intense gravitational forces that conventional vessels avoided. But their enhanced scout ship navigated the turbulent space with remarkable stability, following pathways mapped into the Key's database millennia ago. At the heart of the core region, they found what appeared to be a small, unremarkable planetoid orbiting a stable red dwarf star. But, as they approached, the true nature of the object revealed itself. Not a natural formation, but an artificial construct of immense proportions, camouflaged to appear insignificant to passing observers. The primary sanctuary, Lucas confirmed as the scout vessel established communication with the ancient structure, where it all began and where it might end. The planetoid's surface parted like liquid, creating an entrance large enough for their ship to pass through. Inside was a vast docking facility that could have accommodated vessels many times larger than their scout ship, evidence of the scale at which the ancestors had operated. As they disembarked, the sanctuary came alive around them, lighting activating, systems engaging, automated maintenance units emerging from recessed compartments to acknowledge their arrival. Unlike the smaller facility they had visited, this one had been designed for permanent occupation, with living quarters, research facilities, and command centers built to accommodate thousands. "It has been waiting all this time," Karish said with quiet awe as they followed the illuminated path toward the central chamber. "For someone like you to return." "Not just me," Lucas corrected. "For anyone carrying the right sequences. I was just the first to be deliberately activated and find my way here." The central chamber dwarfed anything they had seen before, a massive spherical space with a complex technological array at its center. Suspended within the array was what appeared to be a tear in the fabric of reality itself, a shifting, unstable rift that pulsed with energies from beyond normal spacetime. The breach, Lucas realized, the ancestral knowledge within him providing context for what they were seeing. Or rather, a contained manifestation of it. The actual breach exists on a multidimensional level that can't be directly observed. "This is what they were trying to repair," Karish noted, studying the containment apparatus with professional appreciation for its engineering. "The mistake that led to their departure." Lucas approached the control interface, the key in his hand resonating with the larger systems around them. "Not departure, dispersal. They didn't leave. They transformed themselves into a distributed network embedded within the DNA of compatible species." As he connected with the primary systems, the full scope of the ancestral plan unfolded in his consciousness. The breach had been caused by an experiment attempting to access higher dimensions, a well-intentioned effort to expand consciousness and understanding that had gone catastrophically wrong. The damage couldn't be undone directly, but it could be contained and gradually repaired through a precisely calibrated energy matrix powered by a specific form of consciousness. They couldn't generate the right form of conscious energy as individuals, Lucas explained, as the information clarified in his mind. But they discovered that a distributed consciousness, spread across millions of carriers and then reconnected, could create the exact frequency needed to seal the breach. So, the carriers were never meant to remain separate, Karish concluded. The entire purpose was eventual reunification, which the Coalition's founders discovered and deliberately prevented, Lucas confirmed. They found evidence of the ancestral plan, but misunderstood its purpose. They thought reunification would mean the end of their species' individual identities, a form of extinction. So they constructed the entire Coalition hierarchy, specifically to keep carriers isolated and in conflict. The Sanctuary's systems continued to activate around them, responding to Lucas's presence and the Key's authentication. Historical records, scientific data, and tactical assessments formed a comprehensive picture of both the original problem and the solution the ancestors had designed. The breach has been expanding exponentially, Lucas noted, as current measurements appeared in the display. The Coalition's founders bought themselves thousands of years by suppressing carrier activation, but they only delayed the inevitable. Now we're approaching critical threshold, within months. not years. Can it still be repaired? Karish asked. The practical warrior focusing on the immediate threat. Yes, but we need to activate all the carriers simultaneously. Lucas accessed the sanctuary's communication array, a technology that operated outside conventional transmission methods, capable of reaching directly into the DNA of carriers throughout the galaxy. The original plan required a minimum of 1 billion active consciousness nodes to generate sufficient energy for repair. And how many carriers currently exist? According to the Sanctuary's latest assessment, Lucas paused as the data appeared before him. Approximately 1.7 billion, spread across 43 species. But the purists have already eliminated nearly 200 million in the past 17 days. Then we must act now, before they reduce the number below the critical threshold, Karish urged. Lucas nodded, initiating the activation sequence. The process was complex, not simply broadcasting a signal, but establishing a quantum connection with each compatible genetic sequence throughout the galaxy. The key served as both amplifier and coordinator, guiding the Sanctuary's immense power with precision that would have been impossible for any conventional technology. Once the sequence begins, the purists will detect the energy signature, he warned. They'll throw everything they have at stopping us before the activation completes. Karish moved to the tactical station, accessing the Sanctuary's defensive systems. This facility was designed to withstand attacks from forces far beyond current coalition capabilities. True, but the purists have been studying ancestral technology for centuries. They may have weapons specifically designed to target these systems. Lucas completed the final preparations for the activation sequence. We need to hold them off for approximately 6 hours once the process begins. That's how long it will take to establish connection with all carriers and initiate the full awakening. As if in response to his assessment, the Sanctuary's perimeter alarms activated. Long-range sensors detected a fleet of vessels approaching the core region, far more than the hunter teams they had evaded during their journey. The Purist Armada, Karish confirmed, studying the tactical display. 37 capital ships, over 200 support vessels. They have committed their entire military force to this operation. They know what's at stake. Lucas initiated the activation sequence, the Sanctuary's central array beginning to pulse with intensifying energy. No going back now. Throughout the galaxy, carriers from every species began experiencing the first subtle signs of awakening. Dreams of ancient knowledge, flashes of insight into technologies they had never studied, connections to others they had never met. The activation would progress gradually over the 6-hour window, preventing the kind of neural shock that had plagued early attempts like Project S9. Meanwhile, the Purist Armada approached the Sanctuary with methodical precision, their sensors probing for weaknesses in its ancient defenses. High Strategist Varan himself commanded the lead vessel, his cold determination evident in the ruthless efficiency of their formation. They're launching the first wave, Karish reported, as smaller attack craft broke from the main fleet. Testing our response parameters. Lucas nodded, diverting additional power to the defensive systems. Let's show them what they're up against. The Sanctuary's outer defenses activated, energy fields that operated on principles the Coalition had never mastered, weapon systems that targeted with perfect precision. The first wave of Purist vessels encountered resistance, unlike anything in their tactical simulations, their advanced shields collapsing under weapons that seemed to bypass conventional defenses entirely. They're adapting, Karish noted, as the second wave approached with modified shield configurations. Learning from each engagement? As expected. Lucas monitored both the ongoing activation process and the tactical situation. The Purists have always been good at adaptation. It's why they've maintained control for so long. The battle intensified as the Purist forces committed more resources to each successive wave. The Sanctuary's defenses held, but the attacks were becoming more focused, more precise, targeting specific nodes in the energy grid, rather than attempting broad assaults. "Activation progress?" Karish asked, as she coordinated the defensive responses. 27%, Lucas replied, his consciousness now partially integrated with the activation matrix. 4 hours, 23 minutes remaining. On the command ship of the Purist Armada, High Strategist Varan watched the battle unfold with analytical detachment. The Sanctuary's defenses were formidable, but not impenetrable. Each engagement provided new data, new weaknesses to exploit. It was merely a question of resources and time. "Deploy the resonance disruptors," he ordered, authorizing the use of weapons developed specifically for this contingency. "Target the primary energy conduits on the equatorial axis." The resonance disruptors, massive cannons incorporating salvaged ancestral technology, fired concentrated beams of anti-phase energy designed to destabilize the quantum-level processes that powered the Sanctuary's systems. Where conventional weapons had failed to penetrate, these specialized devices created localized disruptions in the very fabric of the Sanctuary's defensive matrix. Inside, Lucas and Karish felt the impact as sections of the defensive grid fluctuated and failed. "They've brought weapons specifically designed for this engagement," Karish observed, rerouting power to compensate for the damaged sections. "Far beyond standard coalition technology. They've been preparing for this moment for centuries," Lucas replied. His focus split between maintaining the activation sequence and supporting the defensive operations. This was always their contingency plan if carriers ever reached the Sanctuary. The attacks continued with increasing intensity, each wave more effective than the last as the Purists refined their approach. By the time the activation reached 50%, multiple sections of the Sanctuary's outer defenses had been compromised, forcing them to concentrate remaining resources on protecting the central chamber. "Activation progress?" Karish asked again. Her scales darkened to combat coloration as she managed the increasingly desperate defense. 63%, Lucas responded, his voice strained from the mental effort of maintaining the complex activation matrix. 2 hours, 12 minutes remaining. Another impact shook the Sanctuary, this one penetrating deeper than previous attacks. Warning signals flashed across the status displays as the Purists breached the secondary defensive perimeter. "They've landed boarding parties," Karish reported, the tactical display showing multiple insertion points around the Sanctuary's surface. Elite strike teams with specialized equipment. Lucas diverted a portion of his attention to the internal defense systems, activating protocols that had remained dormant for millennia. Throughout the Sanctuary, automated security units emerged from hidden compartments, not conventional robots or drones, but manifestations of energy with limited consciousness, designed specifically to counter intruders. "The Guardians will slow them down," he said, "but they'll eventually reach us. We need to prepare for direct confrontation." Karish nodded, her natural combat instincts heightened by the situation. "I will defend the central chamber with my life." "Hopefully it won't come to that," Lucas replied, though they both recognized the likelihood of direct combat before the activation completed. The next hour passed in a blur of escalating attacks and increasingly desperate defense measures. The Purist forces penetrated deeper into the Sanctuary with each coordinated assault, their specialized weapons gradually overwhelming systems that had successfully defended against natural forces for thousands of years. "Activation progress?" Karish asked once more, now positioned at the entrance to the central chamber with both conventional weapons and her natural Zakari combat abilities ready. 89%, Lucas responded, his consciousness now deeply integrated with the activation matrix. 43 minutes remaining. The sounds of battle drew closer as the last of the automated Guardians engaged the Purist strike teams in the corridors leading to the central chamber. Karish prepared herself, knowing that the final defense would fall to her. Lucas could not disengage from the activation process without risking complete failure. The first Purist operatives reached the chamber entrance 27 minutes later, elite soldiers in specialized armor, designed to counter ancestral technology. Karish met them, with the full fury of a Zakari warrior, fighting for something beyond mere survival. Her natural weapons proved surprisingly effective against their advanced armor. The biological composition of her claws, bypassing shields designed to stop energy and conventional projectiles. But there were many of them, and only one of her. Despite her superior combat abilities, the sheer number of attackers began to overwhelm her defenses. She sustained injuries, minor at first, then more significant as the battle continued. Still, she held the entrance, creating a barrier of fallen enemies that the next wave had to navigate. "Activation progress," she called out, her voice strained from exertion and pain. 96%, Lucas answered, unable to turn from the activation matrix. 17 minutes remaining. The next wave of purist operatives broke through Karish's defensive position, forcing her to fall back to the inner perimeter of the central chamber. Blood from multiple wounds stained her scales, yet she fought with undiminished intensity, each fallen enemy adding to her determination. And then, High Strategist Varan himself entered the chamber, a tall, gray-skinned figure whose symmetrical cranial ridges marked him as one of the Coalition's founding species. He wore no conventional armor, instead protected by a personal energy field that shimmered around his form. S9, he addressed Lucas directly, his voice perfectly modulated despite the chaos of battle around him. "Your efforts are futile. Even if you complete the activation, the Purist Armada has already engaged elimination protocols at every major carrier concentration. The threshold will not be reached." Lucas couldn't respond directly, his consciousness too deeply engaged with the activation matrix to divert attention to conversation. But he was aware of Varan's presence, of the threat he represented to the entire process. Karish positioned herself between Varan and the central array, her injuries evident, but her resolve unbroken. "You will not interfere." Varan regarded her with clinical detachment. "Zakari Elite Guard. Your species was once valued for its loyalty to the Coalition hierarchy. Your defection is disappointing." "My loyalty is to truth," Karish replied, preparing for what she knew would be her most challenging combat. "A concept your purity directive abandoned long ago." "Truth is subjective," Varan stated, activating a weapon that materialized from his personal energy field. "Order is absolute." The ensuing combat was brief, but devastating. Karish fought with everything she had, her natural abilities enhanced by the tactical knowledge gained through her partial awakening. But Varan wielded technology beyond conventional understanding, weapons and defenses developed from centuries of studying ancestral artifacts. She fell, multiple wounds compromising her formidable physiology. Yet, even as she collapsed, she managed to inflict damage on Varan's defenses, creating vulnerabilities that hadn't existed before. Varan stepped over her fallen form, approaching the central array where Lucas remained connected to the activation matrix. 99%, the automated system announced. "Activation completion in 3 minutes." "Too late," Varan said, raising his weapon toward the central connection point, where Lucas stood integrated with the system. "The purity of the Coalition will be preserved." Before he could fire, a clawed hand grasped his ankle with surprising strength. Karish, seemingly defeated, had mustered her remaining energy for one final effort. "You forgot the first rule of engaging a Zakari," she said, her voice weak but determined. "We are most dangerous when you think we are dead." The momentary distraction was all that was needed. The activation matrix reached 100% completion, sending a pulse of energy throughout the galaxy that connected with every carrier simultaneously. The distributed consciousness of the ancestors, dormant for millennia, awakened all at once, not overriding the individual identities of the carriers, but integrating with them, creating a unified awareness that spanned species and space. Lucas, at the center of the activation, experienced the connection first and most completely. His consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of his physical form, connecting with billions of others across thousands of light years. Not just humans, but Zakari, Varathi, and dozens of other species, all suddenly aware of their shared heritage and common purpose. Voran felt it too, the ancestral sequences hidden within his own DNA, activating despite all the purest efforts to suppress them. His weapon fell from suddenly nerveless fingers, as generations of carefully constructed barriers in his mind collapsed, revealing the truth his ancestors had hidden even from themselves. "What have you done?" he whispered, experiencing for the first time the full scope of the deception his lineage had perpetuated. "What the ancestors planned," Lucas replied, his voice carrying the harmonics of billions of others, now connected through the activation. The beginning of healing. Throughout the galaxy, the same scene played out in countless variations. Purist commanders found themselves awakening alongside those they had been sent to eliminate. Weapons powered down as operators recognized the fundamental connection between themselves and their targets. The carefully maintained divisions between species dissolved in the face of a shared consciousness that transcended physical differences. In the central chamber, the breach containment array began to pulse with new energy, the collective consciousness of billions focusing on the repair that had been the ancestors' final purpose. The tear in reality that had threatened existence itself for millennia began to close, the edges knitting together as the precisely calibrated frequency of the unified awareness provided exactly the energy pattern needed. Karish. Her wounds still severe, but no longer immediately fatal, experienced her own complete awakening as the activation wave reached her. Her consciousness expanded to join the billions of others, including a direct connection to Lucas at the center of the matrix. "It worked," she said, wonder replacing pain in her voice. "We actually did it." "The ancestors always knew it would," Lucas replied, the strain of maintaining the central connection evident despite the success. "They just couldn't predict how long it would take or how much would be lost along the way." Voran, still processing the radical shift in his understanding, watched as the breach containment array completed its work. The tear sealed itself, the dangerous energies dissipating as the repair stabilized. "The coalition as we built it cannot survive this," he said, not in threat but in simple acknowledgement of reality. "Everything will change." "Everything already has," Lucas confirmed, beginning the process of disengaging from the central matrix now that the primary purpose had been achieved. "But not in the way you feared. No species loses its identity in this connection. They simply gain understanding of their place in something larger." Throughout the sanctuary, the fighting had ceased entirely. Purist operatives and defensive systems alike stood down as the awakening eliminated the artificial divisions that had driven the conflict. The unified consciousness didn't override individual will or identity. It added a layer of connection and understanding that made the previous conflicts seem as meaningless as they truly were. In orbit around the sanctuary, the Purist Armada underwent a similar transformation. Weapons powered down, targeting systems disengaged, and communication channels opened between vessels that moments before had been locked in deadly combat. The awakening spread from ship to ship, from mind to mind, creating a unified awareness that transcended the artificial hierarchies of the coalition. Lucas finally disconnected from the central matrix, the physical toll of maintaining the connection evident in his exhausted appearance. Karish moved to support him, her own injuries temporarily forgotten in the euphoria of their success. "What happens now?" she asked, as they surveyed the changed situation around them. "Now we rebuild," Lucas replied, the connection to billions of other awakened carriers still resonating in his consciousness. Not the coalition as it was, but something new, something that honors both our shared heritage and our unique evolutionary paths. Voran, still processing his own awakening, Approach them with the cautious respect of someone who has discovered they've been on the wrong side of history. The transition will not be easy. Centuries of cultural programming cannot be undone in a single moment, even with the awakening. No, Lucas agreed. But for the first time, we'll be working with the truth rather than against it. That makes all the difference. As the immediate crisis passed, attention turned to the practical matters of aftermath. Throughout the galaxy, awakened carriers began organizing new communication networks, establishing direct connections that bypassed the old coalition hierarchy. The sanctuary, now fully activated, served as both symbolic and literal center for the emerging awareness. In the days that followed, Lucas and Karish remained at the heart of the transformation, their unique roles in triggering the awakening, giving them perspective that even other carriers didn't fully share. They worked to facilitate understanding between species that had been deliberately kept in conflict for generations, helping to dismantle the artificial barriers the coalition's founders had established. Voran, surprisingly, became a valuable ally in the transition. His intimate knowledge of the purest power structure and the mechanisms of coalition control provided critical insights into the systems that needed to be reformed. His own awakening had been perhaps the most dramatic of all, from architect of genocide to advocate for unity in the span of a single, transformative moment. 1 month after the activation, Lucas and Karish stood together in the sanctuary's observation dome, watching as representatives from 43 species arrived for the first Galactic Congress of Awakened Beings. The old coalition hierarchy had been dissolved entirely, replaced by a fluid structure that acknowledged both shared heritage and unique evolutionary paths. "Did you ever imagine it would end like this?" Karish asked, her scales shifting through patterns of contemplative blue and purple. "When I first threatened to kill you for sneezing in our quarters?" Lucas smiled, the memory now seeming to belong to a different lifetime entirely. "I was just hoping to survive the assignment without a diplomatic incident. Triggering the rebirth of an ancient distributed consciousness wasn't exactly on my agenda. And yet here we are." Karish's secondary arms unfolded in the Zakari gesture of profound respect. "Harbinger of the great change, just as our legends foretold." "About that," Lucas turned to face her directly, his expression serious despite the lightness of his tone. "There's something I discovered in the sanctuary's historical records that I haven't shared yet." Karish tilted her head, curious. "What is it?" "The mark of the flame-bearer, the scar that you recognized when I first took off my shirt." Lucas touched the distinctive pattern on his chest. "It's not actually mentioned in any ancient Zakari texts, at least, not originally." "I don't understand. The symbol is central to our oldest prophecies." "Because you put it there," Lucas explained. "Or rather, you will. The sanctuary's records show that after this transition period stabilizes, we'll be involved in activating a temporal research facility. There was an accident, or will be an accident, that sends you back in time to the early development of Zakari civilization." Karish's scales paled with shock. "I become the prophet of my own people's legends?" "You become the one who ensures this moment can happen," Lucas corrected. "You introduce just enough information into Zakari cultural development to ensure that when the time came, a Zakari elite guard would recognize the significance of a human with a particular scar." "A closed temporal loop," Karish realized, her tactical mind grasping the implications. "I create the conditions that lead to my own actions that create those conditions." "Exactly," Lucas smiled. The ancestors understood more about the nature of time than they included in the general awakening. Some knowledge they reserved for specific carriers in specific circumstances. "And you're only telling me this now? I only confirmed it yesterday. Besides," he added, with a hint of his old humor, "I figured you deserved a moment to enjoy our victory before learning you have to go become a legendary figure in your species' distant past." Karish's scales rippled with what might have been the Zakari equivalent of laughter. So my destiny was always to meet you, threaten you, then help you save existence itself. All because I sneezed in our quarters, said Bro, and took off my shirt. Lucas confirmed with a grin. Some things really are meant to be. As representatives from across the galaxy gathered below them, the first truly unified Congress of sentient beings in the history of the Coalition, Lucas and Karish stood together at the cusp of a new era. The artificial hierarchies had fallen, the existential threat had been contained, and the distributed consciousness of the ancestors had finally fulfilled its purpose, not by replacing the species they had touched, but by connecting them in understanding that transcended their physical differences. And it had all begun with a sneeze, a casual word, and a moment of unexpected revelation. In the grand cosmic scheme, sometimes the smallest actions triggered the greatest changes. A lesson the ancestors had understood from the beginning, and one that the newly awakened galactic consciousness was only beginning to appreciate. Existence continued, transformed but unbroken, connected but still diverse, united in purpose, but individual in expression. Just as the ancestors had planned all along,